How committed are you to your workplace? I'm Lynda Katz Wilner, founder of Successfully Speaking and host of the Successful Speaker series. Today, my guest is Joe Mull. Joe speaks and writes about commitment in the workplace. He's a certified speaking professional. That's a CSP, and that is the speaking profession's highest earned designation and an international measure of speaking excellence. It's only held by less than 20% of professional speakers worldwide. Now, Joe was formerly the head of learning and development for one of the largest physician groups in the United States. Now, as CEO of Joe Mull and Associates, he's on a mission to fill workplaces with better bosses. Joe has written two books. One is The Cure for the Common Leader, and the second one is No More Team Drama. He's also the host of a podcast, Boss Better Now, with Joe Mull. As an aside, Joe was my buddy when I attended the first NSA Influence Conference, and he was there to help me navigate the ropes of this wonderful conference. I'd like to welcome Joe Mull. Welcome.
Well, hi, and I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
And it's great to see you after haven't seen you since that first Influence Conference. So it's a great
Right.
chance to have a conversation with you.
I'm looking forward to it.
Joe, why don't we start with the fact that you said that you were the former head of learning and development at a company. How did that at a physicians group,
Yeah.
how did that transition to becoming a professional speaker?
Well, the shortest version of the story is that my entire division was eliminated. One day in February of 2013, we were all called together and said that we are restructuring the business model for how we do human resources across this massive academic health center. And so all of the decentralized divisional HR teams were eliminated. And they said,
Mm,
Joe, we love your work. You're an asset. We want you to stay. We'll pay you the same, but we're going to move you over here. And over here wasn't the right fit for me. I had been in a role with a ton of creative freedom and autonomy to create programming in support of the people that were across the division that I was in charge of. And I would have gone from doing that kind of work to being really kind of a corporate trainer. You know, here's your one class, here's your two
mm,
classes. It wasn't the right fit for me. And I had been getting feedback over and over for years that people seem to really enjoy my style and approach at the front of the room. And I started to think, well, if these folks think I have a knack for this and they're thirsty for the kind of training that I was really good at,
mhm,
maybe there are people out there in the world that are thirsty for it too.
mhm.
And I never aspired to this. I never aspired to run my own business. I would probably still be there doing that work now if they hadn't reorganized. Um, but I remember telling my wife after it happened, hey, maybe someday we'll say, thank God I got laid off.
Mhm.
And within a year, we were saying that. And so I feel blessed to have been through that experience because it brought me to where I'm at today.
That's wonderful. Sometimes we don't know when we think there's adversity, we think it's a problem, but sometimes it's an opening to something that's even better.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
sounds like that's what it was. Now, I know you talk a lot about better bosses. What are you trying to accomplish with your work? What is your biggest goal?
Well, when we teach leaders how to be better bosses, we fill workplaces with people who know how to create the conditions for people to thrive. When people go to work and their talent and skills align with their job, when they feel creatively, intellectually, and emotionally fulfilled, when they get a chance to do what they do best every day, not only do they thrive, but the organizations they work in thrive. I say all the time that commitment comes from better bosses. There are a lot of wonderful things that happen in organizations when employees show up with the highest level of commitment, right? All the stuff that we care about if you're running a company, customer satisfaction and revenue and quality, all those things are influenced by the level of commitment that employees bring to their work. And there is no more single influential factor on commitment than the quality of my direct supervisor and her or his ability to meet a complex set of emotional and psychological needs that I have at work. And so, if we can fill workplaces with better bosses, we get more commitment. And then an interesting thing happens, Lynda. Imagine what the world would be like if people enjoyed going to work, if they didn't drag themselves out of bed every morning and go to a workplace that didn't light them up inside, right? If we didn't go home at the end of the night feeling miserable and dreading having to go back the next day, if we can make work work for people, we can actually have a pretty significant impact on the overall health and well-being of society on the whole. So it's about better bosses, it's about company performance, it's about commitment, but it's also about making the world a better place.
And as you know, I formerly was in healthcare as a speech and
Mhm.
language pathologist working in a large hospital. Do you just work in healthcare now, or are you working with other industries?
We work with a variety of industries. The most populated industry we work with is healthcare. What I mean by that is the largest percentage of our clients are healthcare organizations, about 60, 70%, but about 30 or so percent of our clients are not healthcare. I have a social work agency that we support. I have a couple med tech companies, some other IT technological companies, some hospitality groups. And so we work with a variety of organizations. The traits and characteristics and the actions that leaders have to take in order to create an environment where people can be at their best every day, they don't change based on what industry you're in. We know when you look at the psychology of motivation and what leads people to give it all they've got, that what they need from their bosses is largely the same, whether you work in a hospital or at a Dairy Queen.
And but you know the need, especially nowadays, for healthcare providers and healthcare workers and staff to feel good about getting to work. So they don't have other issues. There are enough issues they're dealing with right now. They don't want to deal with issues that the bosses aren't being good bosses. So I think that becomes a big problem in healthcare today.
Well, with so many of our healthcare colleagues on the front lines right now, continuing to navigate a global pandemic, they need the support of their leaders more than ever before. They need their leaders to be flexible and understanding and compassionate. They need their leaders to be communicating openly and being transparent about change. And sometimes that change is occurring multiple times a day. One of the conversations that I'm having with clients all over the place right now is that people are just done. They've spent
Mhm,
10, 11 months on at 10,000 RPMs, just kind of
mhm,
completely
mhm,
revved up and facing imaginable challenges every single day. We are well past the point where an encouraging word here or there or the boss pep talk is going to have any kind of difference. What bosses need to be doing right now is acknowledging that it's okay to not be okay, and to acknowledge that this is hard, and some days it's awful and I don't know what tomorrow is going to be like. So all we're going to focus on is getting through the day. And if you need to take a moment to take a break and compose yourself, or take a walk, then do that and do what you need to do. But then come back and I'll be here and we'll get through it together. And acknowledging that it's okay to not be okay, and acknowledging that we don't even have the mental capacity to worry about tomorrow right now. That's an act of empathy from bosses, and that's what their folks need to hear.
and I love to hear that because what I work on is communication and listening skills, and that's clearly something that leadership needs to have to be effective.
Absolutely. And, we do a lot of training on coaching skills for
Mhm,
leaders.
mhm,
And when you think of the image of a coach in your head, a lot of people come up with the football coach with a whistle around their
mhm,
neck who's saying, no, that's wrong. Do it differently. Try it again. And that's actually not what coaching is. Coaching isn't telling people what to do. It's asking the right questions in the
mhm,
right order to
mhm,
create self-actualization. And the single most important step, as you well know, in coaching is listening. It's
mhm,
listening to learn and listening to uncover, listening to be curious, so that you can ask questions and help people move through that process in a way that results with them having insight and ideas and options from inside themselves, not because they were planted by others.
right. And don't make any assumptions.
Right.
Everybody's different. Now, let's talk a little bit just about a speaking career. Everybody loves to give advice. I'm sure when you were starting out, people were telling you what you should do, what you could do. What was the best advice that you
Mm.
received to be a speaker?
The one thing that I heard early that has held true is that how you talk about your business is 10 times more important than your business. Or put another way, how you talk about your work is 10 times more important than your work. The work is the fun part. Getting to work with an organization or keynote at a conference, that's the payoff, right?
Mhm,
The job of a professional speaker is to get hired and to create programs and products and services that solve a problem
mhm,
for people who are the right fit for them. And so early on, I really started working to understand, how do you write copy for a business website? How do you talk about the work in such a way that it connects with the people who have the power to hire you?
mhm,
And too often we get caught up in wanting to sound clever with our titles and our taglines and our website, but clear trumps clever every time.
mhm,
If people encounter you online, on social media, your website, and they don't very quickly get a sense that you understand who they are and what their pain points are, then they're not going to go down any kind of path with you as a subject matter expert or as a professional resource.
mhm,
And so that advice has held true. How you talk about your work is 10 times more important than the work. I always liken it to an actor. You know, an
mhm.
actor's job is not acting. An actor's job is to get hired to act, right? The actor's job is auditioning. The acting part that comes later is the fun part. And in a lot of ways, professional speaking is similar. You know, the speaking is the fun part. It's the getting hired and communicating about the problems that you solve and the transformation you can create that's most important.
Because once you get up there, you love what you're doing and you
Yeah.
know your information. And so now it's just the opportunity to share it and motivate others.
Right.
What was the worst advice you got, Joe?
There's a version of advice that I still hear that gets distributed a lot amongst, and it's not just in the professional speaking world. It's really anyone who decides to start their own business, and that is that passion and effort are the most important thing.
Mhm,
Um, and I think that's actually can be really dangerous advice, because there are a lot of folks who will try to start a business that they're really passionate about, but and they put a ton of effort into it, but they're not necessarily working smart. They're not taking the time to understand their market. They're not taking the time to position who they are and what they do in a way that solves a legitimate problem for
mhm,
people, for an organization. Um, you can be really passionate about a certain kind of cookie that you've invented, and you can put a ton of effort into trying to build a business that sells that cookie. But if the cookie doesn't taste good,
mhm.
if people don't like the cookie, then all the effort and passion in the world isn't going to bring you success. Passion and effort are important, but learning how to establish your work in a market and how to drive traffic to your business is probably a little bit more important.
It's very timely, Joe, because how many times have you heard during this past year, I lost my job. I'm going to pivot. Why
Hmm.
don't I become a motivational speaker? And there's so many people, you hear this all the time. And I think it takes more than just the desire to be a motivational speaker. And that's clearly what you're validating.
Right. And motivational speaker isn't a brand. And motivational speaker is it's a category, but every motivational speaker out there whose primary purpose is to inspire an audience any of them who have had any measure of success, they're a subject matter expert in one way or another.
Mhm,
They have a depth of knowledge around something, some kind of issue or industry or audience, and they've learned how to talk about that problem and bring solutions to an audience in a way that really connects. And it's that mix of expertise and performance art that comes with knowing how to perform and operate in front of a crowd. And so going out into the world and saying, I'm going to be a motivational speaker, won't set you apart. But going out into the world and saying, I teach healthcare professionals how to be resilient in the face of unimaginable challenges, well, that's a problem and a solution. And you're
mhm.
going to get found and hired more often when you talk about yourself that way.
And I see this all the time because I do a lot of master classes and coach a lot of people that they're subject matter experts. but you also have to be able to deliver your message in an
Mhm.
engaging way. You can't get up there and just lecture. And I think our industry has changed so much because we won't tolerate that anymore. Right? We're not looking for the standard. My name is, this is what I do, and now I'll tell you how to do it. And that's what I just told you. So I think people also have to focus on their delivery skills and their ability to be interesting and engaging while they're up there.
There's and you've probably heard this, Lynda. There's a long running joke in the professional speaking world. Folks who get established, I have a lot of conversations with aspiring speakers, and the question we all get asked a lot is, do I have to be funny?
Yes.
And the answer to the question, which is also the long running joke, is only if you want to get paid. And it shines a light on this idea that no matter how serious your subject, there is an entertainment component to being in front of people. And I don't necessarily mean entertainment in terms of making people laugh like a stand-up comic. I mean, that's part of it. If you can find a way to cut tension with humor, and to keep people engaged that way. But how do you captivate an audience? There's a lot of ways to do it. Humor is one, obviously. Storytelling is an incredibly important part
Mhm.
of professional speaking. Being able to distill your key points and your message
Mhm.
into bite-sized nuggets that people can digest and remember is important. Being able to connect, to create line of sight between the problems that they have
Mhm.
every day
Mhm.
and the solutions that you're there to offer. All of these things matter. And of course, pace and energy and
Mhm.
delivery, all of these things. And I'm telling you something that you are an expert in obviously now, but these are all the things that I think about when the
Mhm.
time comes for me to write new content or
Mhm.
step on a stage.
And it's not about telling a joke. I think a lot of people think, okay, what joke can I tell? And believe me, I could tell you stories of things I've heard people do that. No, you can't do that there. That's not appropriate to that audience. So we run risks with telling jokes, but I think you mean humor is also just be yourself and think of the
Yes.
audience as somebody you're having a conversation with. You're not giving them a talk. You're engaging with them for the hour, the 45 minutes, or whatever that might be.
Uh,
Because I do feel people feel pressured and they come to me. It's like, well, how do I begin?
yes.
And my first thing is don't begin with my name is.
Yeah.
That's already setting
Right.
you up like, okay, I'm done. I'm checking out.
And truth be told, some of the best stuff that has ever come out here has been unplanned,
Mhm,
has been I have had to force myself to be willing to take more risks
mhm,
in front of an audience. And I don't mean risque
mhm,
content. I mean unscripted moments. I mean interacting with the audience in a way that gives that relinquishes some control of exactly what's going to happen next,
mhm,
where in the moment I allow myself to operate from memory or instinct. And I have a professional speaker friend who calls these downloads. She says, I've been on the stage and just in that moment I've gotten a download about a joke I can crack or
mhm.
an observation I can make. And some of the best stuff that I've ever come up with that has made its way permanently into some of the various programs that we deliver is a result of spontaneous moments on stage that came from those kinds of downloads.
And that's why I hear from so many speakers that they do work or training in improv because it
Right.
makes them live in that moment and respond and not panic.
Yes, yes. And when we become overly scripted, you've seen it. We've all seen folks who get up in front of a room and instead of being fully present in the moment with their audience and remembering the 5 or 6 key points or stories they're
Mhm,
going to tell, they're actually trying to perform off a script. And they're instead of seeing their audience, they're retreating into their mind and trying to see
mhm.
their script and act in memory. And it almost never works as well as having that super simple short outline in my head that I'm going to talk about this, this,
Mhm,
this, and then
mhm.
this. And then you go out and you do that.
I'm so glad you said that because somebody just yesterday said to me, I really need to rehearse this more. I said,
Yeah.
no, don't, because when it's scripted or you're operating from a script, the audience can always tell. They can
Yes.
see the gears rolling, turning in your head, and you're not present. I said, so be so familiar with, like you said, with what you want to talk about, but don't keep rehearsing it because then it comes out memorized. And
My final walkthrough every time I'm about ready to go do a program is I sit down and I walk through the outline.
mhm,
Okay, I open with the story about Miles. Then I make the point about how that what we're going to do here today is talk about the 4 things that teams have to get good at together to reduce team drama. Then I'm going to talk about, and I walk through just what are the guts, what's the
Mhm.
outline, what are my transitions, and what are the big chunks, so that when I'm up there, I don't have to stop and think, hey, what comes next? I've
Right.
trained my brain to know it, and then I can just operate in those chunks with what's already in here.
Mhm. I've seen way too many people fail when they have something memorized
Yes.
and they get distracted and they get off track and they're a deer in headlights. They just,
Hmm.
especially in pitch competitions and things like that. I always
Yes.
say, don't memorize. And when they do, they're setting themselves up for a big problem. But if
Yep.
they, like you said, if they know where they're going to move in the next slide or in the next thought, focus on that and then just, your information.
Yep.
You'll come across so much more genuine.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
so I don't know if you answer. I asked you what the best advice was, and I asked you what the worst. What advice would you tell a new speaker? What would be the best thing they can think about?
I get asked that question a lot, and my standard answer normally is get involved in the National Speakers Association. It is a professional community of folks that are brilliant and generous. And as an association, what I've learned there, I'm feeding my family today as a result
Mhm,
of connecting with a group of folks who have built a speaking business. And there are 2 ways to kind of think about what to work on. There's the platform skills, and then
mhm,
there's the business of speaking. And there are a lot of folks who will go to Toastmasters, for
mhm,
example, to work on platform skills, which is a great way to do it. As far as the business of speaking goes, I've learned an incredible amount from NSA. From there, it's starting to think about, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, what is the problem that you solve?
mhm,
Early on, I introduced myself as a professional speaker or as a leadership speaker, and it's too generic. It
mhm,
doesn't stand out. Um, After years of testing and playing with the ideas, um, whenever I meet someone and they say, "Hey, what kind of work do you do?" I say, "I teach leaders how to be better bosses." And it's that simple idea
mhm,
of better bosses that I've built my entire company around. And that's an easier and more unique thing that can be remembered and stand out compared to the idea of being a leadership speaker.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
so that's typically my advice: is get involved in NSA, develop your platform skills, learn how to build a speaking business, and really get clear about the problem you solve and make that your entire brand.
Mhm. That wonderful advice. And I totally agree with the NSA because, as you know, I joined a few years ago and I've been speaking and running workshops and working with clients for several decades. But it shifted. It shifted some of my focus and gave me more skills. I would say every time I go to a meeting, I pick up
Mhm.
nuggets of information that just make me a better speaker, a better coach.
Yeah.
Um, I-
And the other side of it too, the first few years I was going for the content. So if you join a local chapter of NSA, most months there's a chapter program,
Mhm,
there's a professional speaker who comes and teaches for free voluntarily, a certain aspect of the speaking business or building a skill. And for years, that's why I went, was
mhm,
to learn that content, those skills, and to grow my speaking business. But very quickly, I recognized that my success in this business is going to be tied to the relationships I build
mhm,
across the continuum of and the community of professional speakers. And um, some of my best friends in the world now are other professional speakers, and over and over and over again, that is what I heard from other professional speakers at the highest levels of success is you come for the content and the learning,
mhm,
but it's the relationships that will take you to the next level
mhm.
and that really become transformational.
And speakers aren't specialists in every area. So when you know other speakers and they know what you do, all of a sudden there are added opportunities because we can all
Absolutely.
help each other.
Yep. Yep. The only reason that we're doing all of this tech now with all the virtual programming that we're doing for our clients is because we've all been helping each other out
Mhm,
and
mhm,
and calling people and saying, "Hey, we're using the same kind of equipment, and I can't get this to work." And the nice thing about NSA is it was founded by a man who believed that professional speakers shouldn't compete with each other; that we can all
mhm.
be successful, we can build a bigger pie, and it's that spirit I think that carries across the association.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, As a speech and language pathologist, and I do a lot of work with voice, and I think a lot about our voice and taking care of it. Is there anything that you consciously do, Joe, to make
Mm.
sure that your most valuable instrument is in good shape?
Well, interestingly enough, Linda, my bachelor's degree is in voice. I have a
Ah,
music degree as a singer. And so I've been training as a singer since about 16 years old. So I came into this business with a little bit of an advantage. I knew how to project my voice in a healthy way. I knew how to care for my voice. I knew how to use and manipulate the full range of my voice in a way that a lot of other folks don't get training in. So
mhm,
that's probably my first piece of advice is, work with a voice instructor, take voice classes, work with somebody like yourself or someone who specializes in understanding healthy and unhealthy ways
mhm,
to manipulate this
mhm,
this mechanism in here because it's a complicated
mhm.
mechanism. um, the other piece of advice, and it's such a simple thing, is use the microphone. you
Oh,
know Use the microphone. The number of speakers who get up in front of a room, amateur or professional or otherwise, and say, oh, I don't need the microphone. Well, first and foremost, yes, you do. The people in the back of the room, the sound only carries so far without amplification. You're going to be shouting at the first 5 rows and unheard by the last 10. And so use the microphone. It not only doesn't force the people in the back half of the room to work twice as hard to hear you, but it preserves your voice. And when you have a microphone in a hand, remember that you don't have to yell. That's the job of the microphone.
and I'll add one thing to that, Joe. With everything that we're talking about now with diversity, equity, and inclusion, for a
Hmm.
speaker to stand up and say, I can project my voice, there could be hearing impaired people in the audience.
That's right.
And they may not want to raise their hand and say, I need you to use a mic. And
Right.
so we really need to be sensitive as speakers that there are all different challenges that people in our audience might have, be it color blindness or hearing impairment.
Yes.
We have to accommodate to that without saying, is anybody here colorblind? I'll make some adaptation. You can't do that. You
Right.
need to
Right.
think about the microphone and all of the other the slides that you're using, the color that you're using, whether it's all visual or do you explain things. And so that's key for a speaker.
Absolutely. Well said.
Now, I'm hesitant to ask this question, and I don't want to end on this note, so I'll have to find another question to ask you. But tell us a time, we all have these moments where you felt you did not shine as a speaker, that it didn't go as you wanted, because we do learn from that. So tell us a little bit about that.
I was in my third year of running my own business, and I was in Kentucky, and I was presenting at a statewide healthcare conference. And I had been hired to do 3 or 4 breakout sessions during the day, and then I was closing the event as the keynote speaker.
Mm,
And the breakout sessions were back to back to back. And I was in the same room the entire time. And so I would do a session, and then people would leave, and then the new people would come in, and then I'd do a session. And so we were between sessions, and the people from the last session are filtering out, new people are coming in. And one of the things that I always try to do is go around the room and introduce myself as people are coming in. I'd say, hi, my name is Joe. What's your name? You say, Linda. Oh, hi, Linda. Nice to meet you. And thanks for being here today. And just try to do a little bit of that one-on-one connection ahead of time. So the time to start a breakout session is upon us.
mhm.
And at the last minute, a woman dashes into the room. There's only one seat left. It's right in the middle. As a hush falls over the room to start the session, I decide in that split second, I should introduce myself to this person too, because I was doing it to everybody else.
Mhm.
And so right before I started, and as the room got quiet, I turned to this woman and I said, hi, I'm Joe. What's your name? And she said, Kiam. And I said, Kiam. And she said, yeah. I said, oh, okay. Kiam. Did I say that right? And she said, yes. And I said, I don't think I've heard that name before. How's that spelled? And anger flashed across her face, and she kind of looked around the room to see what I was doing, and she realized I was completely serious. And so she folded her arms, slumped her shoulders, and said, K-I-M, Kiam.
As somebody who works with regional dialects and
Right.
accents, that is,
I yeah.
oh my goodness.
And so I was mortified. She was mortified, but I was in Kentucky. Everybody in the room was warm and accepting and
Okay.
understanding and laughing, laughed about it. I apologized to her profusely later, and that thawed things a little bit. But I learned a very valuable lesson, Lynda, which is that anytime you say to somebody, "What's your name?" no matter what they say next, your response should just be, "It's very nice to meet you."
Well, that's interesting because my response is often, because I deal with international clients, how do you spell it? And let me write it phonetically so I say it the right way. But it would
Right.
have been very interesting to phonetically write Kiam. I could do
Yes.
it. Names are precious to us. So we have to
Yes.
be careful, but we also want to make sure that we are addressing a person correctly. So that's not a bad story. I was worried that you were going to tell me something that was horrible and we'd end on a negative note. I think that's a great
No.
that know our audience, and
Yeah.
we all make some mistakes and missteps or misspeaks, which I deal with a lot in the book that I just wrote, that we have these misspeaks, but they're often unintentional and
Yeah.
they're not malicious. And so we have to have a sense of humor about them as well.
Right. Right. And if we can remind ourselves that the person across from us is probably a pretty good person doing the best they can most of the time, we become more forgiving,
Mm,
compassionate people, not just with ourselves, but with everyone around us.
absolutely. And so assume good intentions, as a dear friend has
Yes.
always told me. Joe, great information. I love all the things we talked about. We never really got a chance to talk about those things at Influence several years ago. So it was great to have more of a conversation, learn what's
Yeah.
made you a successful speaker, because you certainly are. Your CSP
Thank
shows
you.
that, your involvement in NSA, and your words of wisdom that you shared today. So I do thank you for your time, and I wish you continued success in your business.
Well, thank you so much, Linda. Whoop, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be with you today, and I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation as well. Thanks for having me.
All right, my pleasure. Take care.